but this still should be pretty organized enough to deal with, what we're trying to accomplish, which is um, going through talking about delivering presentations. So in the previous module, we talked about planning presentations. We talked about things that you need to know and think about as you are developing a presentation. Today, we're going to talk about delivering them. So now that you've planned them, now that you've organized them, now it's time to deliver them, to get them from your head and your pieces of paper and your slides to being shared with others. Okay, so one of the things, and remember, this is all too starting to hark back to one of the first things that we talked about early in the semester, which is establishing credibility, right? So one of the things that you want to establish when you are delivering a presentation is presence, right? And in establishing presence, you are establishing credibility. The goal is to maintain your authenticity. You need to know your material, and you need to rehearse. In my other life, when I'm not with you, I teach a course at the graduate level, and even at the graduate level, I implore students to rehearse. It is just imperative that they do that. So as you all are planning, your presentations for your individual, because that's where you're going to do an actual live presentation. I want you to know that you should be rehearsing, right? Because if you don't, it's going to show, and you're going to feel extremely nervous. You might still be nervous even if you do prepare, but you'll be extremely nervous if you do no rehearsing. That means talk through the way that you would like to talk through your presentation, and do it, with no audience. Record yourself, right? Use the voice memo on your phone, or depending on the kind of laptop you have, utilize that as well to help you, listen to yourself and how you sound, and make a decision about, whether or not you sound the way that you want, whether you're saying the right things that you want to say. If you need to sit and write it out or type it out, do that. But you should know your material. You should rehearse it. You should create some kind of outline. What do you want to say first? What do you want to say second? What do you want to say third, right? They say the next thing that your book talks about is overcoming fear and speak with confidence. Listen, you may not ever overcome the fear. Let's just be really real. What you can do is you can decrease your nervousness and your fear if you know your material and if you rehearse. And then you can also speak with confidence. I mean, there are times in which you can be nervous about your message because you're not sure about how people will take it, but you can also still speak with confidence. You know what I mean? Confidence in knowing that what you are saying is right, what you are saying is true, what you are saying is that you're giving the best information at the moment that you're giving it. And then also your presentation is for people, right? So you need to focus on the people. If you're giving a presentation, the idea is that you'd be looking at them, right? It doesn't mean that you have to have like this, contact eyeball to eyeball, but you kind of want to give an impression that you are looking at people, that you are sort of, aware of them and their presence and all of those things. So focus on the people. So you're establishing presence, and the way that you establish presence is by establishing credibility. We know what credibility is. It's character, caring, and competence. We're maintaining authenticity. We're being who we are. We're not trying to be something that we're not. You know your material, you rehearse it. You may not overcome your fear, but you can speak with confidence. You can decrease the fear, and decrease the anxiousness, by knowing your material and rehearsing it. And then, of course, most importantly, you want to focus on the people. I just talked about staying flexible as it relates to this semester and just us all being in this virtual world. But the same thing is true even when you're giving a presentation. One of the reasons why, too, you need to do this presentation is because for some of you, this may be the first time in which you're giving a mini presentation virtually, right? And please know that, this will become the norm, right? It will become the norm of giving presentations virtually. So this is an opportunity to experiment with that, but stay flexible. Like, know that sometimes things will change. Sometimes things will be stalled. I was doing a virtual speaking engagement with the Los Angeles Public Library. And one of the moderators to moderate the discussion, her computer crashed. You know what I mean? So one person ended up having to moderate, the whole thing. And, it just, sometimes things happen, and it doesn't necessarily have to be as drastic as a computer crashing, but just stay flexible to adjusting, let's say, the length of your presentation. Sometimes they want you to fill a certain amount of time, or they don't want you to fill too much time. So you want to, you just want to be flexible. Sometimes they might move you from being last to all of a sudden now you're first up, right? Stay flexible. At other times, something may come and you are first, and then they're like, oh, we're going to move you to sort of like right before, the break. Just stay flexible, right? And be willing to make adjustments. Use the room to your advantage. We're going to talk about that. Communicate non-verbally. We're going to talk about that too. And dress for success. So this is the other part of establishing presence, right? Your credibility, authenticity, knowing your material, rehearsing it. It's about being flexible, using the room to your advantage, communicating non-verbally, and dressing for success. And we're going to talk about this in a little bit more depth. So the first thing, establishing credibility. Internal presentations provide the opportunity to change others' views of you. Internal presentations, when they use that phrase in particular, they're talking about specifically presentations that you do within a particular a company, within a context. That's what they mean by internal presentations. This gives an opportunity for your superiors, or those who perhaps you work with, to see you and see you in a different light, perhaps, than what they've seen you before. It's really your opportunity to, not to be haughty, but to show off, to show what you are capable of, to show that you have the skills, that you have the hunger, that you are, about your business and about doing good work, right? So it's an opportunity for you to shine. What is song Rihanna says, shine like a diamond, right? So this is your opportunity to really shine, right? And again, you want to do this without appearing self-serving, and find ways to increase your perceived credibility. So, you don't want to look as though you're about yourself and that you're being, selfish, and that, you know, nothing else is important. But you also want to increase your credibility. Your doing your presentation will increase your credibility. For external presentations, you're often dealing with people who have superficial impressions of your credibility. So External presentations, they're talking about specifically outside of your company, outside of your direct sphere of influence. And so these people don't necessarily have a experience with your credibility or know you, and so they might view you as credible to some degree, right, based upon whatever information they might have or know of you, and that will oftentimes be, generally limited unless you have a relationship with the person, meaning the person. For example, you run into somebody that you were in class with, or somebody that you worked with before. They, of course, would be able to help with establishing your credibility because they have experience with you. But usually, unless it's somebody that you already know or knew prior to that particular moment, most other people have a very limited sense of your credibility. And this, of course, the presentation is either going to increase their view of you as credible, or it is going to detract from that. Okay? So it's either going to increase their view of you as credible, or they're going to detract from, or it's going to detract from it. Your level of preparation or lack thereof will decide that. Okay? Your preparation or lack thereof is going to decide is going to help people decide how credible you are. So part of your credibility, of course, it's based on competence. And so knowing your material and demonstrating that you know your content well establishes your competence, which of course increases your credibility. We talked about maintaining authenticity. So of course, it's your goal to develop your presentation skills and to find ways to present who you are to your audience. Now listen, let's just be clear. We all know we know several things. We, at this point in stage in our life, we have a decent idea about what we're good at and what we're not. We also know what we, could use some more work in, right? Or we know that we don't have a lot of experience doing certain things. So if presentation and presenting is one of the things with which you do not feel extremely comfortable, that's why rehearsing becomes one of the things that you want to make sure that you do. And maybe if you're shy, you don't want to rehearse in front of somebody, maybe a family member or a friend, or, then you want to record yourself, as I mentioned earlier, as a way to, but once you record yourself, you got to watch yourself. You got to listen to yourself to begin to kind of figure out, is this for you? Is this sort of what you want people to take away from the presentation? And then, of course, BMCC has a number of different things, opportunities for you to increase or develop or improve your presentation skills. So you want to, look and take advantage of those opportunities as they arise and put them on your calendar. Knowing your material and rehearsing. So you want to run through your presentation, not just once, right? You want to run through it a couple of times, right? The more comfortable you become with the content, the easier it is for you to, freestyle, as it were. where you can add things to your presentation, perhaps a story or an anecdote of some kind. But because you know your material, you can bring things in to make it more engaging on the spot, off the cuff, as they say, right? Because you know your material. So it's like learning to play a particular song on the piano, on the clarinet or something. And you know how to extend a note. You can, be fancy because you know how to do it. Um, the same thing is when you are, like, say for instance, if you're learning a language, you get to know, you're able to say more and hold longer conversations because of the fact that you're more comfortable with the structure. So the idea is that the more comfortable you are with your content, the better you'll be able to really spend time in engaging your audience. You want to make sure you work out any weakly connected areas. In other words, if you have an argument or a cause and effect or something like that, you want to make sure that it's clear and that it's on point and that it's logical, that it's substantial, right? If it's not, people will pick up on that, right? And they may ask you about that in the answer, in the answer session, question and answer session. And then you want to identify the parts that you want to emphasize through tone and nonverbal communication. Again, this is something that I teach specifically in another class, not at BMCC, but at another class, I teach specifically that, right? Emphasis and phrasing and things like that. But you all took speech, right? So this will be a great time for you to go and look at those speech notes or look at the text, and look at things like emphasis and phrasing that would be helpful for you as you make decisions in your presentation about what you want to emphasize, right, and how. This chart is in your book, but just wanted to point out, and let me see if I can find my pen, because for some reason, let me see if it's in here. It is here. So we can see that public speaking is right up with people's fear of snakes. People fear public speaking. You are visible, you are vulnerable, people can see you. And there are a whole myriad of reasons why people find themselves being afraid of public speaking. But it is something that many adults fear. It doesn't have to be a traumatic experience, and sometimes people have had traumatic experiences, which causes them to be fearful. But it doesn't have to be that way. So, again, it's not about overcoming it. I think it's more about decreasing it. I mean, let's be real. I get nervous sometimes when I have to do public speaking engagements. And more often than not, now it's more about me being nervous about how people are going to take my message, than about me not necessarily being confident, although that can be impacted. My confidence can be impacted by not being sure about how people are going to receive my message. And one way to get at that is to know your material, know what you know, and be confident, stand in what you know, and talk about what you know. So that's a key piece of advice. Talk about what you know. And that's this is advice like forever and ever, amen. Like anytime you find yourself caught out, not sure what to do, whatever the case might be, this is something for you to hold on to. Talk about what you know. If you know one aspect, you can defer to everybody else in your group or on your panel about every other subject, but the subject that you know, that's the one you talk about, that's the one you comment on, that's the one you give advice for. Okay, talk about what you know and talk about it confidently. And then again, nervousness, generally speaking, is not necessarily bad. It only becomes dysfunctional, as they say here, is when it impairs your ability to deliver your content. So being nervous or having some anxiety or a little anxiousness, I mean, it's part of human nature, and that in and of itself is not a horrible thing. But when feelings start to impair your ability to deliver your content, they cripple you to the point where you can't do it, you can't explain or express yourself, then it is problematic. Okay, then it is problematic. So, again, you've taken speech, so hopefully you've gone over some, at least at least one relaxation technique, that you are aware of your breathing, that you know how to practice visualization, that you focus on friendly faces to gain composure and confidence. You watch your food and beverage intake. This is huge. Okay, this is huge. You really want to watch that, especially before you do a presentation. To sit down and eat, a bunch of lasagna, spaghetti, beans and rice, whatever it is that's comforting, good, heavy comfort food, that's the stuff you don't want to eat before you present. Okay? I don't care if that's in the morning or at night. Anything that's going to make you want to crawl in the bed and lay down and stretch out, that's not what you want to eat. Okay? Not before a presentation. The other thing is that getting comfortable with your audience members before you start your presentation can also be helpful. So sometimes as you're setting up and preparing, people might show up, right? Physically or virtually. Say good morning, say hello, right? Which is what I try to do when people show up early and I get on and I see people already here. I say good morning, I say hello, you know. That makes people feel welcomed. That will make you as a presenter feel a little bit better. So, attempt to connect, right? They're human beings too, just like you. Focus on people, right? You want to make people the subject of your sentences. So sometimes there might be a name here, or name in something in uh, like a handout, but sometimes I'll use your names, right, when I'm teaching. And that is me focusing on you, both as students in this section, but also as my audience. I'm focusing on the people when I use your names in sentences or your names in examples. Likewise, if you have colleagues who are there, you want to make sure that you refer to them by their name and or title. One way to do it is just check in and ask, right? How do you want to be called? How do you want to be referred to? Everybody's into the, pronouns. I go by she and her, or I go by him and they. So however your colleagues choose to be identified, you can make sure that during your presentation, you refer to them by name. And again, just use names of the audience members as appropriate, meaning in the midst of giving an example, it might be nice to use audience members' names, just to help them connect and be engaged. So again, this stay flexible piece is huge, right? You want to arrive early, not be on time, but arrive early. They say when you arrive on time that you are already late, right? And if you have a job and you're blessed to be working during this pandemic, showing up on time, just, you've experienced what it means to show up early, right? You get to kind of just transition into your job and what your responsibilities are. But when you come on time, you still trying to, get yourself settled and whatnot. And so perhaps you may have realized that you got to show up at least 10 minutes early, so that you can kind of settle in and get comfortable and get ready, right, to deal with whatever responsibilities you have. I'll give you the perfect example. I get up early, very early, because I bring my kids to school to the Upper West Side. And so I do that because it gives me an opportunity to do what it is that I need to do without feeling rushed and without feeling harried. So when you lose your place in your presentation, don't panic. Pause, right? Don't panic. Pause. When you lose your place, don't panic. Pause. Take a moment. The moment might seem like a long time to you, but it's not a long time to the audience. It's just in your head. Trust me. Never tell your audience things haven't gone as expected. And I know a lot of times we all do it. I've done it, I'm not prepared, or I was, things haven't happened the way I needed them to happen, or, you're disqualifying yourself. When you start talking to your audience and telling them about your problems and how stuff didn't, happen the way that you wanted it to, and this, that, and that. You're really, during a presentation anyway, you are disqualifying yourself. It's not what you intend to do, but that inevitably that is exactly what you are doing. You are disqualifying yourself. So always have a plan B. So if for some reason the computer is not working, do you have handouts, or vice versa? If your handouts get wet or lost or messed up, or the printer doesn't act right, can you utilize PowerPoint, Keynote, Prezi, whatever other software platform to do your presentation so that people have some visuals? Do you have a backup, in terms of technological devices? If, your, laptop isn't working, do you have another device that can be used with the appropriate attachments? Because, stuff happens. And again, know what your key messages are. So even if for some reason you have no visuals whatsoever, if you know what your key messages are, you can utilize that in order to still have a wonderful presentation, right? You can still have a wonderful presentation without visuals, but you got to know your stuff. You got to know your message, and you got to know the point that you're trying to make. Use the room to your advantage. Use the room to your advantage. So this is really about, not staying specifically in one place. I learned when I was teaching junior high and high school that good teachers don't sit down. They're always moving around the room. And it's just a practice that when I was in the classroom pre-COVID, I moved around the room. It helps people to stay engaged because you're moving. You're not stagnant. You're not still. And then, of course, people can see you easily. When people can see you easily, then they're going to pay attention and participate. The goal, though, is not to move around to the point where you're distracting your audience. Okay. Use podiums and tables strategically. You don't want to lean all over and fall all over the podium, but you want to, touch it and use it as necessary and as will help further your message. As it will help further your message. This is something that's key. In the previous chapter, you learned AIM, right, for planning. And now here goes soften. For delivering your presentation. So soften stands for smile, open stance, meaning your legs are the same. Your legs are as wide apart as the width of your shoulders. You are leaning forward, right? Not to the point where you're going to tip over, but leaning forward in a way to show that you are present and paying attention. You should be able, that leaning forward, if you were to go up on your the balls of your feet, you should be able to sort of just rise up on the balls of your feet easily. Tone, it's how your voice sounds, right? Eye contact. And then, of course, nodding. Smile, open stance, forward lean, tone, eye contact, nod. This is nonverbal communication, and this is the way that these are some things you need to utilize, or a way to incorporate this into your presentations. This should go without saying, but sometimes it's just helpful and beneficial to go over the basics. Formal business dress. It's intended to project executive presence and seriousness, right? Business casual dress. It's intended to project a more comfortable, relaxed feel while maintaining a high standard of professionalism. Okay? So formal business dress, it's about executive presence and seriousness. Business casual, it's more relaxed, but still maintaining professionalism, right? Keyword, executive presence and seriousness. This is comfortable, relaxed feel, but then also a high standard of professionalism. So there's nothing comfortable about this one. The comfort is here. Casual dress, it's the least formal option, and it's rare in a business related setting. Although, of course, nowadays with COVID and many people working from home, who knows, right? I think probably people are more casual in their dress because they don't have to show up anywhere. Okay, so this is a chart that kind of talks about the messages sent by what you wear, the formality of the workplace attire. So here is the most formal, casual is the least, and as we can see, the more formal the attire, the more authoritative. And the more and more we get to casual, the less, we start to see in terms of authority, and we look more either trustworthy, creative, friendly. And not to say that those are not necessarily important, but they may not necessarily add to your credibility. Again, here's some things, some important points about the visuals in for your presentation. You want to avoid turning out the lights in most cases. Don't start your slides right away. You want to speak to your audience, not the screen. So that means your positioning of your body is important, right? Which way are you turned? Are you turned toward the screen or you turned toward the people? You want to interpret your slides, not necessarily read them word for word or verbatim. And I know that I've done this for you. I've read things, you know, I interpret the slides, but I try not to always read them verbatim. Because after a while, like, that's boring. Nobody want to hear that, especially if they can read it themselves. And then, of course, the goal is that before you show anything, before you show any slides, you want to preview them. So if you can, use a remote control, right, to advance slides when possible. This is helpful for you because then you're free to move around the room, right? And it just gives you more flexibility. You want to avoid standing in front of the slide projector, right? Because it'll cast a shadow on you. And then if you have any blank slides, you want to use those strategically. On occasion, with your slide, you might have some handouts. And this can be a very good thing. It can reinforce the way that you have or what you have taught. Right? And so they can help review the content that was covered. And also, too, it can be a support, right? Serve as a support piece of information. If possible, please, you know, don't give people stuff to look at when they're supposed to be looking at you. So it's great to have a handout, but you want to give the handout, you want to give it out at a strategic moment in your presentation. If you give it out too soon, if you give it out while you're talking, they're no longer listening to you. They're looking at the presentation. So, and then you can really kind of set up how you want them to see and understand this particular piece of content. So when you interact with your audience, right, you want to field questions as they arise, right? If possible, you want to set up a situation or create a situation for people to meet others. Sometimes I've gone to a presentation or a workshop or something, and I've been like, I don't want to be here, or I don't particularly care for it. But then I can meet somebody who I'm like, yeah, they're cool. And, you know, one particular training I went to, the training was all right, but what was most valuable was the person that I met. And it was a good experience. And so her and I still are in contact to this day. So you want to offer the opportunity for people to mingle, and then you want to follow up with the audience members after. Figure out what's a great way to follow up with them, whether you're selling something or not, and whether you just have some, you know, good, just that, you know, follow up. You either want to offer them some more resources, you want to stay in contact with them, you want to direct them to some other things they might want to look into at another time. So These are ways for you to interact with your audience during and after the presentation. So as you field questions, pause before answering, because if you don't know, it's fine to say you don't know. And you want to say, that's a really great question, but I'm not sure I can answer that, or that I have enough information to answer that right now. Perhaps you can talk to, or maybe you want to check out this. So sometimes, even if you don't know the answer, you might have a resource that they can go to, or a person they can go to go ask that. Offer that, because again, it takes some of the pressure off of you. Of course, be honest. Show appreciation. Thank you so much for your question. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for being involved. Something like that. Be concise. Y'all know sometimes I'll go off on a tangent. I try not to do that. But when you're definitely doing a presentation, something that's a little bit more formal, you want to, and you're fielding questions, you kind of want to try to stick to, answering their question as briefly, but as fully as possible, right? You want to get to the point, but you want it to be brief and full. And then, if possible, what will happen sometimes is that somebody will ask a question and you'll need to reframe the question, reorganize the question so that it matches both the agenda and what's going on for people at the moment. And what's most important for your presentation. If you're presenting in teams, again, the planning is important, but you want to talk about and rehearse, right, your presentation. You want to rehearse and talk about what your objectives are, what your key messages are. You want to make a decision about who's going to do what section of the presentation, who's going to present what section. You want to stand together and present a united front. And then you want to refer to another person's points, and then you transition effectively. So transition, whether it's out of that particular space or out of, or into a new topic based off of, thank you, who's running. Yeah, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Transition effectively, right, based off of, where you're going to next, whether it's another part of the program or another section of the presentation. Being a supportive audience member. So, we'll have much more opportunities and experiences to be an audience member than anything else. So you want to take the role of an audience member. You want to be serious. You want to make sure that you're not doing a whole lot of conversation, a whole lot of talking and being disruptive, because of course that distracts the presenter, and nobody wants that, right? People are trying to present, they're trying to do good work. You want to make comments and ask questions that are helpful, both for the presenter to say on message, but then also actually something that you're interested in knowing and that perhaps other people want to know too. We've all heard people ask questions that just seem to be way off of where the presenter was going, and it's not helpful. For most business presentations, you often share professional interests, right, with the presenter. So talking to them afterwards might be wise, right? Talking to them, getting their card, right? Things like that. And that can be beneficial for both you and your team. So we actually got through this today pretty well. So there's no other additional things. But just to kind of recap what we've talked about, or what, I'll open up for questions, is that we talked about the importance of presentation delivery and how it impacts credibility, right? And how does it impact credibility? If you know your material, and you can express it well, you are demonstrating competence. Oh, sorry, let me move that over. Okay. So how does presenting, delivering your presentation well impact your credibility? Knowing your material and expressing it well equals competence, and competence is one of your building blocks of credibility. So we talked about delivering presentations with authenticity, confidence, and influence. We talked about the soften model of nonverbal communication, right? And so let's see, let's go back to the soften model real quick. Where are we? Right? Smile, open stance, forward lean, tone, eye contact, and nod. Okay? Smile, open stance, forward lean, tone, eye contact, nod. Great little thing to remember and get a cadence for. Use slides and handouts. Do you have to have a ton of slides? No. Do you have to have a ton of handouts? No. But it might be appropriate and helpful to have a few slides, one handout, right? You want to make sure that you interact with your audience as a presenter, right? So for those of you who have family members who are teachers and executives and things like that, you know, if you've ever gone with them and watched them, you know, you may have seen them interact effectively with an audience. And sometimes you might see it, if you've ever gone to a lecture or gone to a presentation pre-COVID here at BMCC and somebody was speaking, and then after that you see people sort of waiting around to speak to the presenter, and you watch the presenter talk to other people, things like that. Presenting with teams, we talked about, you know, when you're presenting with a team, you have to do some extra work, right? You have to kind of organize your presentation a little bit tighter and decide, you know, who's going to do what, things like that. So it's not just the planning of the presentation, but it's the delivery of the presentation that's also important. And you have to prep even with a team. And then, of course, we talked about being a supportive audience member, you know. Be somebody that contributes to the conversation and contributes to the presenter, and what their message is, and not somebody who tries to detract from it. Okay? There'll be more than enough people who try to detract from, you know, something that people are doing. So that's how you be supportive. That's how you also sow good seed, so that when you are presenting, people will be supportive. All right. So let me stop sharing my screen for a second. So are there questions, things people would like to ask? I got people texting me from my other class, so sorry, I'm just looking at that. Are there questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay. All right, folks. So what I will do is, once module 7 is open, I'll send you a message, and I'll try to fix all of the other things that needed to be fixed, so that we can, you know, close up these other modules. Okay. So just know that if you've had some difficulty I will be going back in sometime between today and tomorrow and really trying to finally see if it's on my end, and I will send an update out via the Remind app. And I will also let you know once module 7 is actually open, to so you can do the quiz and you can do the exit ticket. So you can just sit tight and exhale and stay under the covers for the rest of this Friday afternoon as it relates to my class anyway. So there's no rush. Okay. And you will be given adequate time to complete, and adequate time is a week, because the stuff I've given you, you don't need a week to do, but I know life. So I give you a week to do those things. So if there are no other questions as it relates to this, I've already told you about what's going to happen, and what I'm going to check on my end. So then we're all good. All right. I'm going to try one more time. Any other questions? Questions? We actually got through module 7 in one take. So that's great.
Professor,
All right,
I
folks.
have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
For the business report, are we gonna do presentations as well as a group, or just the written portion?
It's just written.
Okay.
Yeah, it's too messy right now in this current context for us to do that. That's too messy. That's why you're doing a individual live presentation, and it's a way for me to see you as an individual.
And the live presentations, we would do it like for say during class times, whenever it is
Yes.
due, or okay.
Yeah. So in another couple of weeks, we're gonna set up who's gonna go which week, right? Because I think they're about 20. I know somebody left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So we have about 19. So 10 people each week is pretty much how we're going to do that. Okay. Yeah, about 10 people. And you'll have about 5 minutes to do it. So it's not going to be a long presentation at all. It may feel long, but 3 to 5 minutes. You have your task. So it's just an opportunity again for you to shine and show me what you could do. So you have one group project and one individual. Okay, are there any other questions? All right, if not, we getting out early today, folks. Have a great rest of your weekend. Like I said, just pay attention to the Remind app. You will get updates from me. Don't stress. Yes, sure, you can stay. You don't have to stress about anything that is due. Like I said, I'm going to go in and just double check on my end to make sure things are straight once and for all. And then I'll still give a couple of days extra just to make sure that if you didn't have an opportunity to, something needed to be fixed. So that way, once I close it, it's closed and they're not being reopened. And I think that's it. Okay. So, go
Thank
ahead.
You. Yeah, I was just saying thank you. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Okay, Matthew. Okay, I know somebody wanted to stay and chat with me. So other than that, everybody else, you're free to go.